Kamala Harris is in line to be the next Democratic presidential candidate. However, as it stands, she is at a historically low approval rating. On the other hand, Donald Trump will likely run again for office. Trump, who already succeeded in beating a white woman in that same race. So, when the left afford to support a black woman who is running for president, is it just too risky? Should we instead consider someone with more familiar demographics? And if so, what does that say about the morals and principles of the left? So yeah, this is the Kamala Harris is just not having a good time as vice president, it seems. Just lots of things are just not going right about her vice presidency. But one or the other, it looks like she's going to run. It looks like Donald Trump is going to run. And should we be supporting? Like, should we maybe look out at somewhere else? Because I think most people on the left would agree that Donald Trump needs to be beaten no matter what. So, is it simply too risky? Let's do our opening statements. Stardust?
Yeah, do we actually know that she's 100% going to be the nominee for president? Because if Trump is going to run again, Biden can run again too. They're not that different in age.
Well, he
But
said...
we already know that Biden is running, so this question is a little confusing.
Biden has been...
Biden's going to run again.
Hold on, 1 second. Stop. 1 second. Biden has been cagey about... He's going back and forth, first of all. And he can also die. So one way or the other, right?
So we're just going to assume he's going to die.
Well, look, we're assuming that Kamala Harris is going to run. So
wait, how come we're not assuming that Trump is going to die?
Oh my God! Can you
wait,
please?
But
Can you please?
I might have to get a link because I'm pretty sure Biden's already announced that he's running.
But okay, holy shit! Let's engage with the question, talking about if it's Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris has expressed her. Well, she ran for president last time. So, are you going to engage with the question, or?
Yes, I am engaging with the question, and me engaging with the question is saying that I don't think Kamala Harris is going to run because Biden's already running.
Okay, all right, next person then.
And they're delegating all of the vice president duties to her, just like they usually do. They like what they say. They give all of the duties that the president doesn't want to do to the vice president. So it makes sense. Of course, your approval rating is going to be low.
Okay, Fawn?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, while Biden has expressed it, there is nothing official on Kamala actually saying definitively that she is running. It's just people saying so right now.
Cherry?
So it's my understanding that Biden is going to be running for a second term. I think Kamala Harris's approval rating is directly tied to Biden right now, so I don't think that that those numbers are relevant to her chances of running. I don't think it's relevant to compare her to Hillary Clinton, who did have a lifelong track record in politics and already had a bunch of people hating her before she even ran for president a third fucking time. And on top of that, I do believe that this administration's approval rating will go up when people get over this fatigue of COVID, when they start to see the productivity of the infrastructure bill coming out, and a lot more positive stuff that will happen. I think these numbers are just preemptively doomering a lot of people.
Fawn?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, I'm not super up to date on everything in American politics because I'm not an American. But I don't exactly necessarily how the question has been framed about so can the left afford to support a black woman who's running for president? I don't think that we should. I don't like identity politics. Just vote for her because she's a black woman. I think it's important to look at her whether she's actually doing well and is actually the best candidate. But also, I don't know. it's so tricky because I feel like your voting system is so fucked that I wouldn't even know what to do if I had to vote in your country. I'm sorry. That's my honest
Welcome.
opinion.
I actually love the New Zealand, or you're in New Zealand, correct? I love the way that they do their votes. I love the way that they
So
have
sorry, I know
their
we're still
system
in
set up.
sorry, we're still in opening statements. So go ahead, Alice.
Sure. First off, Fawn is right. Voting, or American voting system sucks. Absolutely. Everyone else is, everyone's talked about this already. The realistic answer is Kamala Harris is not going to. Whoops. She's not going to run. I'm a professional streamer. I dropped my microphone on my cup. Kamala Harris is not going to run as a presidential candidate. She will be a vice presidential candidate along with Biden. That's what's going to happen. That's the reality of the situation. But regardless, the question is interesting. And the interesting part is, should the Democratic Party essentially focus on electability? That's the real question here, is about electability. And it's an interesting question. Should the Democratic Party focus on electability? Yeah, absolutely. They have to. There's no way they're not going to. They're going to do that anyway. They fucked up once already. They're not going to fuck up again. The Democratic Party is rich white people, so they're already going to just focus on electability anyway, because that's what they do. They're rich white people. Can the left afford to support a black woman who's running for president? Oprah Winfrey is also going to run for president. Why don't we go ahead and support Oprah Winfrey? She's a great person to support for this. There's also precedent for this. There's literally actually, Trump winning is a pretty good precedent for just random celebrities winning, just based on their popularity. Is it too risky? I don't give a shit about risk. The Democratic Party sucks ass. Should we consider someone with more familiar demographics? Rich white people hold power in this country. Rich white people continue to hold power in this country. That's probably not changing this election. What does that say about the morals and principles of the left? They have no morals and principles. The Democratic Party sucks ass. This is an interesting topic because of that. I've actually been talking about this in Calliopean Club recently a little bit about how both Democrats and Republicans in this country, in America, only focus on essentially their electability. And for Republicans, that means pandering to the people who hate the gays. And for Democrats, that means pandering to rich white corporations. Both of them do that, but Democrats do it more. And that's just the reality of American politics right now. It sucks ass. Revolution.
Okay. Go ahead, Victoria.
My thought process on when it comes to Kamala Harris is the reason why her rating is so low is because we have this weird, hate towards women who are in powerful positions. Anything a man does, or anything a woman does that a man would equally do, it's like, oh, she's, controlling. Oh, she's just a bitch. Oh, she really knows how to do things. Oh, she's just nitpicky and, nagging. Like, anything a woman does when it comes to, like, the equal of a man, it's looked down upon. So I feel like that we should actually have we should try to, pander towards Kamala Harris as our president, just simply because it would set a new precedent towards who should be voted for and who should be able to be put into office, not this weird popularity contest that it is at the moment.
Go ahead, Sonia.
So first, I agree with what others have said in that I don't think Kamala Harris is actually up to run. I know it's a rumor right now, but it seems pretty far-fetched to me. Kamala is a complicated person. She's got a very interesting background. I'm here in California. I'm quite familiar with her. Funny thing about her situation, you'd think that a lot of right-wingers would love her because of how many POCs she's put into prison here in California. She was a very aggressive DA and pursued very aggressive charges on particularly negatively affected people of color here in California. So she's not well regarded here in California, not at least by communities that have been negatively affected by her district attorney period. By the way, that little shot I took at right winger. Sorry, I just figured it'd be funny, but I understand if some of you are pissed off. Um, the I don't think that we should be rallying behind her in particular, not because of the not because of the whole fear of a black woman, running or not being able to get enough votes, but because I think that she's not somebody whom I feel represents the broader scope of people on the left or even near the center. I think that she represents a very specific subset of privileged America, and so I wouldn't put my vote to her unless absolutely necessary, like basically like the Biden vote that I gave last election. And I didn't want Biden for president, but in the end, he's the one who came out on top in the primaries. So wasn't going to vote for the other guy. That's about the only way that I would do that. Now, I think what we should be doing, though, is we should be putting a lot more support and emphasis into other candidates. And the more that we get in terms of people running, the more options we have. And the more diverse that pool of people running is, the more everyday people are going to realize that there are people that they can potentially vote on and that they feel that may better represent them, as opposed to just like casting the safe vote, right? So I think what we need to do is we really need to be pushing people to getting themselves into the pool of candidates and pushing a broader and more diverse array of people to running for office.
Open to the panel.
Can I just say, like, multiple people have said it. American politics are fucked, like just totally fucked. Like the way that like, for instance, presidential voting works in the United States, just like totally disenfranchises people. So like that's one of the big problems here for me is like we can talk all we want about what like Democrats or Republicans are going to do as far as electability, but it's just like there's just no real impetus for people to vote because their choices are essentially dumb and dumber. There's not a good choice in American politics right now. No matter what we do, we're supporting essentially the Democratic or Republican establishment. It's utter bullshit. So.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jerry.
Okay, so I wanted to bring up a few things. For 2024, Trump being a nominee, it is possible that he can win the primary, but I think we just saw in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin is an example of a Republican who just won his seat by distancing himself from Trump. And before that, we saw the 2 seats in Georgia get flipped from people who were blindly like loyal to Trump. So I think this idea that Trump is still in control of the Republican Party, I don't know if that's 100% true. And on top of that, I want to point out that Kamala Harris, while it can be very possible that people don't like her because she's woman or because cop or because she did her job, Sag, all of it very fucking Sag, but she's also like in charge of the southern border crisis. And along with that, like voting rights. So the 2 things that she's tasked with are really impossible things to combat, and nobody's seen any progress. And that's just common for a vice president to take on. Just like we have to reflect on what Mike Pence's approval rating was. I think a lot of this is preemptively shutting her down as a candidate or as a favorite in a country that would like to pretend like a moderate Democrat isn't ideal. We saw ranked choice voting in New York City, and I'm sorry, but the ex-cop won that fucking shit. And he won it by a lot in what probably the most progressive and melting pot of a city in this country.
Yeah, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, cops are popular for a reason. And the growing unrest definitely attributes to that and makes people feel like they need somebody who is a strong leader. And, if it really comes down to it, we can at least count on Kamala Harris to be that type of person who's willing to do all these hard things and take on the hard task that the president doesn't want to take on. That's basically her job. She's done it and she's good at doing it. So.
Okay, yeah. Alice hit the nail on the head when it comes to like electability and the point of it, like because this for instance came up in the last round of primaries where a lot of people said like, oh, I like Bernie, but are other people going to vote for Bernie? Well, then other people, if I think my neighbor's not going to vote for Bernie, then I'm not going to vote for Bernie, even though I do like his policies better, right? And for the safe choice that is Biden.
Wait, no, the ranked choice voting in New York City just like
What?
destroys that idea. The idea like, oh, well, if there was a way that I knew that everyone was going to vote for the progressive candidate, then my vote would feel more secure. But in ranked choice voting in New York City, it was proven like people still want moderate Democrats. I'm sorry, but the majority of the country, even the majority of our big popular cities that are pretty fucking progressive, still like the moderate candidates.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, it's true that is what happened with the election in New York, but that doesn't necessarily suggest anything about the rest of the country. Like, I personally, as a voter, feel disenfranchised by how our voting system works in America, which is the first past the post. The fact that the only vote that I can put has to be essentially of a candidate I know will win means that I'm not going to vote for any third party candidate because it's basically just throwing my vote in the garbage.
No, there's still progressive voters that like want a Bernie, want an AOC, but this idea that like the majority of the Democratic Party is a Bernie party or is a progressive party, I think is it's just being fabricated at this point.
It's a myth. Yeah. It's
Oh
a
yeah,
myth.
it's not a thing.
Like
Wait,
you
I-
exist and you're valid, but you're not the majority.
Of
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
not, but I guess what I don't understand is like, there's no downside to ranked choice, for instance. Like, that's only a net benefit. So it's kind of weird. The only real reason that we don't implement ranked choice is because what it does right now, not just in presidential elections, but also in local elections, is it keeps essentially power with Republican and Democratic main candidates, essentially. So that's the only reason that ranked choice isn't done, is because it's not giving enough power basically to the candidates that we have, so they're not going to go for it. So like New York is a good example because New York is pretty progressive overall and is more willing to try out things basically if you look at who their governor is. So like New York is a great example, but that's not going to happen in Texas. That's not going to happen,
I will say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as somebody who did vote in New York City when it was ranked choice voting, that is a lot of fucking shit on that goddamn voting ballot. That was so many people to look up. That was so many people's like fucking whatever they were running on to even vote on. And I'm just talking about the mayor. The entire fucking ballot for that election cycle, there was maybe like 14 elections I had to vote for. Only 2 of them were not ranked choice. Like, if we complain about a voter base that is uninformed, like, holy shit, they're just gonna be even more stupid when they have to like rank everyone down the line. I don't know. That was my biggest concern about that.
I think what people did was they voted for basically the candidate they knew most, and they didn't add the other votes. And that's what a lot of people end up kind of doing anyway, even without ranked choice. They just kind of go with the one that they know. But you're more likely with ranked choice, for those who are informed, for them to cast the votes for the candidate they actually really want the most, and then additionally, and then down the line, right? So it's ranked choice voting really does have a win no matter what, because you're still getting the same kind of voting result, in terms of those who aren't informed or who are daunted by the list. Right?
I understand listen, I am pro ranked choice voting. I'm just saying that the people who are going to be voting, they have a lot more homework to do. And part of that is also like these organizations that we pull towards, like the family whatever party, working family party, the Green Party, all the like little subsections. They normally pick one candidate to represent them. And I think like moving forward, the way that we do get pretty partisan within our own party, like we saw people's ideas of Kamala Harris on this panel, like is also pretty divisive. Not everyone in the Democratic Party likes her, but for something like ranked choice voting, we would need a party that's like a little less partisan, that's willing to rank her and like favor her in a way that like doesn't make everyone think that like she's not a fucking Democrat or something. I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
So,
Well, go ahead. You go first.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that. I don't see how ranked choice voting like means anything. Like there was a race and a moderate one, and so that means like what? What does that?
The New York City mayor doesn't fucking matter.
I didn't say they don't matter, but I don't see how.
But that's a pretty huge race underneath like president.
What underneath president? I mean, what are these inferences that you're drawing here? That literally means nothing. One,
you think being the mayor of the largest city in the United States means fucking nothing?
You're putting words in my mouth. I didn't say that at all.
Then make your words make sense.
Well, then no, listen to me, Cherry, and then you'll understand. So I'll try it again for you. Don't worry. So, with these progressive, you're saying that there was a race and a moderate one, and so that means that the country. That means that the country does not like a progressive candidate. That like blows the idea of progressivism out of the water. It actually does not, right? Like
you didn't say that.
Oh, so you don't like when people put words in your mouth? Great. So, it matters who the individuals were. Who were the candidates that she was running. They were running against the moderate, right? Who were they running against? Were they popular? Did they have name recognition, right? Did they have
AOC
funding?
backing?
They had fun. Yeah, sure. That doesn't.
They had funding.
Oh my God! Hold on. Let me finish my words. Thank you. Right? Did they have funding? Did they have name recognition? Right? And a simple endorsement does not equal name recognition. Right?
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I answer everything you say, so you don't like load me up.
Yeah. Great. So, did they have all these different things? Right? And did they have like an organization that could actually carry them through? All those things matter, right? And were they actually also a quote unquote progressive? Because another thing, when people say they're progressive, they're not actually progressive, right? There's all those things. And so one race does not tell me or anyone else that progressive gets blown out of the water. That I guess the country does like moderates. What?
I don't know. I wouldn't call it one race, right? Didn't we just see a
race?
moderate? Didn't we just see a moderate win the fucking Democratic primary? And then we saw in the most progressive city in this fucking country, while maybe you don't think it's a big fucking deal, they also got a fucking moderate mayor. So maybe you don't think that that's indicative of much, and then I think I just don't care that you feel that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever, but like, that's
honestly.
No, hold on. That's fine. That's fine, whatever. But like, you haven't actually proven your point. You actually haven't made your case.
No, I have.
Like,
it just doesn't satisfy you because you have like a wet dream of a progressive fucking country.
It's not a good case. Hold on. Wait a sec. Hold on.
What? Maybe just win anything, Prime.
I'm gonna. What? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Would you?
Like maybe you and your progressives should just try winning anything. Start there.
They literally have.
Where?
Congressional.
Clearly not enough.
They're in congressional.
Not enough?
Oh, well, excuse me. If I'm going to talk, all right, you don't talk over me. Great. So let's try it again. So, they literally have been winning races, right? We've actually had progressives within the Senate, within Congress, within seats across the House, like city councilships, and all those things, right? Like we've had
a majority
races. Majority? What? No, not majority. No, actually.
So then I'm not wrong when I say that the majority of this country isn't progressive. What are we even arguing about?
Holy crap! Hold on. No, because like Cherry's making random inferences, like from one race. She makes one race, and it's like, that must mean
I think
you're
experiencing psychosis.
Wow.
Majority of the Democrats that are elected the majority of the Democrats that are elected are not progressives.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Obviously.
Yeah. So the
That doesn't
majority
mean
of the
anything.
Democratic Party, excuse me. Okay. So the majority of the Democratic Party is not progressive. Majority of the Democratic Party votes for moderate Dems. And if progressives were as popular as you seem to think that they are, we wouldn't have so much of a problem getting people elected in different districts when they're progressive. Unfortunately, we do. We like they get beat out. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, I'm not done. Okay, so progressives. Sure, we have a little caucus of them in the Dem Party. But if you really want to change the minds, you have to do it on a small scale level first, right? And the majority of the country is not ready for these huge progressive policy changes.
Yeah, so these are embarrassing arguments. So, we don't. There isn't already, right? There isn't already a progressive majority within the party, right? Ergo, right? Progressivism is not or cannot be popular, right?
Well, we didn't say cannot. We just said it isn't.
Okay, great. Well, that's good. Well, we're starting to make some progress here because right? Don't have. The reason why you can, sorry, let me start over again. You're having moderates like all over the place, true, but like have they also been running against progressives? Like, has there been a left-wing choice in all those races? Has that been actually the case? And also, there is a left resurgence. So we can see, especially like through the Bush administration, right, that the left was just dead. The left wing of the Democratic Party was dead. And now we're actually having research. Now we're seeing new individuals pop up, and we're seeing this like through the Squad and through others, right? And this is the beginning
the Squad
of the
under attack.
That has nothing. Sorry, that has nothing to do with anything.
Nancy Pelosi's based his book.
Sorry, would you? Okay, whatever. So the Nancy Pelosi, that embarrassment, literally can barely get anything past that one, right? So like, why? So just saying that moderates, right, have the majority when we're just now having a leftist resurgence, and we are just now seeing a push for people, for instance, to not run with a PAC backing, right, like without outside funding, right, just through grassroots funding. What is this point? I'm sorry, Alice, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want. This is always fun. First off, I'm so happy somebody else is taking my role, so this is great. But to back up, kind of what Cherry and Stardust are saying, and then what you're kind of like, you guys are not actually. You're not actually disagreeing. You're just like speaking past each other again. I think somewhat. Is that like Cherry? You pointed this out in the election that we're talking about here in New York. Where you had essentially a choice, right? Not just first past the post, but a choice. You felt overwhelmed. There were a lot of choices, and you had to research a lot of different candidates. Everybody is stupid, essentially. The American public is really dumb. So part of the reason that progressive candidates aren't popular is probably just that they're not getting money to go run and make people aware of them. Is that really progressive candidates don't get a lot of backing financially because progressive views are not well supported by corporate America. That's probably part of the reason that for the effect that you're talking about. Because I agree, progressivism is not a politically popular thing to have, right? So like the American public, maybe some people who would say they're Democrats might be progressive. Maybe it's more common in the Democratic Party, but like the political power that exists does not support progressivism. It's corporate.
Sounds a little conspiratorial, don't you think?
No, I don't think so, because it's like an actual factual effect that we can go prove. Like if you go look at how like American politics works, it's really focused on like focusing power in like essentially lobbying, for instance, which is literally all backed by corporations. Like all of this.
For sure. Yeah, it has some influence, but I think we're overestimating, right? Like we're overestimating the effect of like if the average person has more progressive views, I still think we would see that would be reflected more in the polls, right?
I mean, I have surveys on that, but like the average American is not progressive, but the average Democrat is. I have survey data.
Hold
I'll
on.
send it to you.
I feel like I haven't gone over the New York City stuff in a while, but Maya Rudolph was fucking huge. And she was a big name throughout all of this. And she didn't just get like monetary support, she got like name recognition. She got put on people's platforms and stuff. This idea that the progressive candidates don't make enough money to like run, I think can be the case in other states and other local governments and stuff like that. And I think that can contribute to like a failure to like launch and be as relevant as like moderate Democrats across the country. But that's more indicative of what like that voter base wants, right? And I am coming from New York City, which the voter base does want more progressive values, but they ran on a lot of unpopular progressive positions, which is like ACAB and defund the police. And while like progressives want to hang in tight and like hold in strong, they sign up and they back some really stupid shit, all in the name of like solidarity. And sometimes y'all have to drop that. Like I've seen progressives attack AOC for not being progressive enough for their standards. And that's wild to me. And that makes me know that that movement is so scatterbrained.
It's kind of true.
There are problems.
Strategy.
There are problems with the progressive movement here, and a lot
Also,
of it
I think I said Maya's name wrong. I'm so sorry.
Maya Rudolph?
And
I have to double check that.
I think it does have to do a lot with sort of a lot of people are dissatisfied with things continuing to basically maintain a very flat pace in terms of progress. And so people get to the point where they want to accelerate things, right? So accelerationism is a big problem in the overall progressive movement. And that creates this culture of purity testing and wanting to push people out whom they felt that understood where they were coming from and represented their values, but didn't pan out to do things quite to the level they wanted them to. And they get more and more anxious over time, and it gets more and more antagonistic, right, in purity testing. And obviously, one of the problems that we have with progressivism overall, just like is the lack of unity and lack of unified message, because a lot of people in the US are fairly progressive, generally speaking, on a lot of issues, but progressive candidates and don't have a lot of unity underneath them and around them, and don't really have much of a unified message. And so they're seen as being kind of wishy-washy and risky, right? Because we have this whole problem as it is with our existing voting or electoral infrastructure, that basically people end up in the end casting the safest vote possible, right? And so one of the things that I think really needs to be worked on in order to make progressivism more viable in terms of our electoral politics is to start creating a more unified base with a unified message, and to do away with a lot of this infighting and purity testing.
I think that's impossible, Sonia. I don't think that we can actually do that. Like have that solid. I wish we could have that, but like we have. AOC said this, right, and I perfectly agree. Is that her and Joe Manchin, right? Like if this had been a parliamentary system, would not be in the same party, right? I'm sure you agree with this too, right? These two wings are completely different in their goals, right? I will argue the Joe Manchin wing is closer to Republican than he is to what people classically think of a Democrat, right? That they have. That their interests literally do not align, right? And that's why, right, Stardust can say something nonsense like compliment Nancy Pelosi, right? Because like these two parties are opposed, right? Nancy Pelosi does not like the Squad, right? Because they are diametrically, in some cases, opposed to her agenda. So like there is a contention there, and I think that contention is good. Actually, I think it's good to have a thriving party with different ideas that are being tossed back and forth. I think it actually makes us a more robust party than any like a group, more groupthink one, right? Like a smaller, more focused groupthink one. Now, electorally it's problematic, as you said, right? That's certainly the case. But like I think that fighting needs to happen so that when we have moments where we need to coalesce, meaning like the Democratic primary, right? Then like the best ideas like come to the forefront, where the party can then decide in which direction it wants to go in. Does that make sense, Zonia?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a very difficult situation because we have this pendulum swing, not just from party to party or political extreme to political extreme, but we also see the pendulum swing inside, like within the parties, right, where you go from more progressive to more conservative within the Democratic Party, and you get similar kinds of pendulum swings within the Republican Party. Part of the problem is that our political or our electoral system kind of, no matter what, ends up inevitably boiling everything down to the safest vote again. So this creates this problem when people tend to when times are harder for people economically, they tend to vote more progressively because they're more of in a fuck it kind of mode, right? And they're willing to take the chance and risk it. But when there's either economic stability and progress in general, like success for the community, or extreme contention from the opposite side of the political aisle, then they end up casting the safest vote. So obviously there's a reason when people fall upon harder economic times that they're willing to take the riskier vote to go for a more progressive candidate that they feel can better represent them and better solve their problems. So there's clearly an underlying understanding that is the type of person you want in order to help ensure your economic viability and stability.
I think I'll go with Alice. Just so I didn't know your hand. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Sorry. First off, Zonia, you mentioned like that people are more likely to support progressive policies when they're actually in economic trouble. But the weird thing is, it's actually also true that they're more likely to support conservative policies when they're in economic trouble. That's like a Republican focus, essentially, is economic trouble, especially in rural areas. They really focus on Republican policy essentially wins out in rural areas when there's economic trouble. But anyway, I actually wanted to mention, in addition to that, one of the other things that I've noticed is and I think Cherry mentions this, and I think Stardust also called attention to it. Democrats and leftists in general have a lot of infighting that conservatives and Republicans don't have. When you look at conservatism or Republican policies, they're actually really well aligned. There's no one who's a Republican who's going to be like, wow, this person's not Republican enough, really. There might happen. It might be kind of rare. But it's just not usually going to happen. Republicans are going to vote for policies that are generally avoiding increasing taxes, avoiding expanding social programs, avoiding expanding LGBT rights, avoiding those types of things. And that's just frankly more popular because, again, Americans are stupid. So I'm not saying Republicans are all stupid, but I'm saying that.
Are you American?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm stupid. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I'm just making sure you got the pass then. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm an idiot. No, I'm a good example of a stupid American, frankly. I don't do enough research for my political candidates. I generally vote party lines, even when it's actually harmful to me. Sometimes I'll vote Democrat, even though I make over $100,000 a year. Voting Democrat is harmful for me. But I vote party lines, basically. So, but that's my point, is Republicans don't have the same problem that Democrats have. Republicans aren't sitting there fighting with each other about whether they're Republican enough, whereas Democrats do have that problem.
Yeah, I literally had to fight other Democrats to just argue that 100K is middle class in this fucking country.
Where I am, it's not middle class, but
it is middle class.
Not
You
here.
listen to me right now.
Where I am, it's
middle
not.
class.
It's
So-
200K is middle class where I am.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
depends
it
on where
can
you
be
are.
up to 200K too.
Yeah, depends on where you are. Where I am, kind of like New York City. It's not middle class to make 100,000 in New York City.
Yeah. No,
I'm in
facts,
New
100%.
York City.
I'm in
basically.
Silicon Valley. It's 205,000 here for middle class.
Yeah, depends on where you are. That's all I mean. But I agree with you. You're right. When mentioning I make over $100,000 is going to get me kicked out of,
Yeah,
you know,
they're
leftist
just like,
groups.
you're rich.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
No, I'm not rich. I make enough money
Yeah.
to like eat food where I am. You know, like I'm not saying I'm like I used to be literally poor. I remember like literally being at a point where being able to afford rent and ramen noodles was difficult. Like I'm not in that spot anymore. So I recognize like, yeah, I'm speaking from privilege, but I don't make rich people money. I'm not sitting here like I'm gonna go buy a BMW. I'm struggling. I have a car out in the parking lot of my apartment complex that does not work, and I'm struggling with myself. Can I afford to buy a new car? I don't make enough money that I don't have to think about money. $100,000 is middle class, but it's not. You know,
So-
it's not rich. But yeah, I have to like fight with other Democrats about this shit.
So when I disagree when you say that Republicans are necessarily lockstep. I think for a lot of things they are. I think economically that there's a lot of agreement on that one. But when it comes to social issues and when it comes to foreign policy, I think there's a lot of disagreement on the right.
No way. If the
so- and
evangelicals could back up Trump, there's no way that they give a fuck if they disagree about shit.
No,
Motherfucker has
I-
cheated on every goddamn wife and grabbed women by the pussy, and they're like, yeah, he's our leader. God has sent him to
I
us.
didn't say
He's
they
the
didn't have.
second coming of
I didn't say they have
Jesus.
hypocrisy. I didn't say they didn't have hypocrisy. I'm saying they
they fall in line.
Oh, hold on. Well, and I think there's a certain extent that's true, but I'm talking about within like, because what, at least how I took what Zonia's comment was previously was, like that we have in the Democratic Party, we have like constant like infighting within the base, right? And how we talk with each other, how the groups interact, like how we engage with the electoral process, right? All that is like fractured because of our opinions, right? Because we deeply disagree on so many things, even though we are generally on the left. I think there's a lot of that on the right as well, right? I think maybe they're better at falling in line, but like I think there is like a robust discussion about social issues. I think especially like a younger generation that's coming into the party, there's a discussion about like, okay, can we still hate the gays? Like, is that like a thing that we can still do, right? How far are we going to take this thing with with trans issues? Like right now it's a winner, right, to beat up on trans individuals, but will still be like we've lost out on hating the blacks, right? Though we still resurrect that every so often. And then so then we change that to like, you know, hating immigrants, and then there's the gay individuals, right? But we lost that fight, and they were lucky and they were happy when they lost that fight because the politicians, they didn't want to deal with it anymore, right? But then like, okay, well then we'll use trans people as our cultural. Now I think there's a lot of like infighting as to like whether these things are a distraction to like the wider, more important things, which is their economic policy. And then in foreign policy, should we necessarily invade? Not everyone's a neocon, right? Not every Republican is a neoconservative who thinks invading is what the U.S. should be doing all the time, right? Oh, Fawn, did you have your hand up? I'm not sure if you. Okay.
I was just gonna say that I think that the right absolutely will take in whoever the fuck is like, hey, can I join your group? They're like, absolutely, come on in. But if you're trans or gay or any of those things, you gotta hate yourself. That's one of the prereqs. It's fine if you just don't like yourself, because we don't give you rights.
And they didn't fall in line. Now that I'm thinking about it, right? Like, Trey, your point about Trump, that's an example of the base actually not falling in line. That's actually the point against you.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Do you remember that race? Trump was never supposed to win. The entire establishment was against him. They had their choices, which was like a motherfucking
No. Trump
hold on,
got a
hold on.
majority of the voter base, and then
Yes.
they all fell in line for him for the
Yes.
presidential.
No,
race.
but everyone does that. If that's what you're talking about, okay. So
No,
that's what you're
everyone does
talking
not
about?
do that.
No,
We
no,
saw
no,
the fucking
listen,
Bernie Bros did not
listen.
do that.
Holy shit! Yes, they did. Yes, they actually did.
You're
vote.
saying the
No,
Bernie
there
Bros
was a
came
big
out for
divide.
Hillary?
There's
Go
a big
back.
divide.
Go
There's
back.
more,
So, hold
there's
on,
so
hold on,
many
hold on.
Bernie Bros.
So hold on. Let me
that-
finish. Hold on.
Mommy,
Let me-
Daddy, please
oh
stop
my
fighting.
God, please. Let me-
Guys, give Prime
let-
space to talk.
Let me finish. Yeah. So my point was
I'm an
that like
all-woman
during
panel.
those primaries, right? If we're talking about infighting between Republicans, right? That's exactly what happened. Trump was never supposed to win that primary. Trump was the joke, right? What's not the Bush, Jeb Bush, right? He was going into, he was a favorite. He was going to clean house. This guy was the guy, right? And then if not him, okay, well, we got Marco Rubio. And if not him, we have Romney wasn't part of that one, right? I forget. There was another person, right? But the establishment was
Jeb
sure.
Bush.
Sorry, what?
Jeb Bush.
I said Jeb Bush
Or-
first. Jeb Bush,
Mhm.
Mark Rubio. I forget who the other person I'm thinking of. But like they were falling. That was the point. But then the base rebelled, and they went for Trump. Now, if you're saying they fall in line, but yeah, because they want a Republican to win. Yeah, they want a Republican to win, and so they voted for him. But like beyond that, that's not a.
Yeah, but then we have
fighting
the
happens in
Democratic
primary,
Party,
not the
where like
general. Go ahead. Sorry.
what
I
is it?
don't
We have like the Hillary
understand what
voters,
point-
and then the. I'm sorry, you go first. Start.
No, it's okay. I don't understand what point Prime is trying to make here. That
Okay.
makes no sense. That actually, like, yeah, never mind. Just
Well, fighting. No, I'll try it again. Fighting happens in the primary, not the general. So we're talking about if a party is quote unquote
Yes, that's-
united, that doesn't just because they all
You-
vote.
you can't primary
they're voting
without
at-
voting.
because they're voting against the other team, right? They're voting against the other team within the general. I don't want a Republican to win the governor of my state. Like
That's what we're
do I-
saying.
do I
They fall in
necessarily-
line regardless. For Trump to hold the evangelical vote, and for the people leading the evangelical people to still call Trump like a fucking gift from God is making my fucking point here.
That's
I don't know what your
hypocrisy.
point is, that you think
You're
that,
not-
that the
you're
Republicans
just
are going to
yelling.
somehow have a primary where everyone's shaking hands and jerking off together, and then the
was
last
that's
one
not
that
my
comes
point.
on the
That's the
cookie is
opposite of my
the
point.
fucking winner?
That's
That's
my
not how
oppo-
it
That's
works.
the
It's
opposite
all
of my point
primaries
because you're
are
not
like-
actually
It should work
listening to
like
me. You're
that,
just
by the way.
yelling, Terry.
Progressives,
It
You're just
should look
hold on,
like
Terry. You're
progressives.
just yelling, and you're not actually listening. Of course, you don't understand because you like literally have gotten every.
It's because
part
you're
of it
not
wrong.
making sense.
No, because you're literally
Okay,
not
it's-
listening.
it-
Once again, it's a pretty
it's
simple point. So I'll
I'm
progressive.
try
sorry,
it again for you.
mansplain it one more
That's
time
so
for
bad.
me.
No problem, I will.
It's-
So once again, when within a primary, right? That's when you have multiple ideas within a party that come out to the forefront, like we had in Democratic side, right? Talking about the more progressive side of things, like in Biden and Bernie, and the moderate side of things in Biden, right? And like, well, most of them honestly. But then there was a fight as to who was going to win. Progressive lost, right? But that's where the fighting, that's where ideological fighting happens. It doesn't happen in the general. And the general, people get behind their candidate, right? Just like they got behind and elected Joe Biden, right? And just like the Republicans had gotten behind Trump, because they don't want Hillary Clinton, right? A pro-abortion Democrat that they've always hated. Or they've always hated Hillary Clinton. So oftentimes,
How many
just
of
voting
Hillary
against-
Clinton voters didn't come out to vote for Obama after she lost the primary?
Yeah, there's going to be a drop off, but it's not important.
Yeah, it's almost like one side of the aisle will blindly support their candidate over the other.
What? But that doesn't. That's okay. All right. You
And
don't
also
seem to
kind of
understand what I'm
I-
going for.
point that if progressivism was really that popular,
It's not about progressivism.
then okay, well, dude, whatever. Okay, if
Oh.
being progressive, if progressive policies were that popular, we would have voted them in. If Trump got voted in, then we could have voted those in too if they were that popular. They're
But that-
just not.
That's a nonsense point that has nothing to do with what we just said. That's like a non sequitur that you just put
I
out
think
there.
I think it does have. I think it does have stuff to do with it because
It doesn't,
again,
but okay.
It
sure.
because nobody expected Trump to be winning the primary, did they?
No, they didn't. They made a joke of it and gave him
Yeah,
so
they
much
made a
free
joke of
press
it.
as a
So-
fucking joke of it.
Yeah,
I thought
but
he was gonna win it.
that has nothing to do with my point.
How much
My only point is to
and the
back up
progressive
Zonia and that
policies were
infighting.
that
Okay,
popular,
you want to
they
fight
would've
on the
won in the
progressive thing. If you
primary.
want, we can do that too, but that's a separate point from what I was talking about. Like jumping off of Zonia's thing and talk about the infighting, right? There's infighting in both parties, right? I was disagreeing with Alice, just saying that there's infighting in both parties. We could see it actually in the last presidential primaries. That's it.
I really don't believe that. I believe all of the infighting, a majority of it happens within the Democratic Party because we are the only party that you can actually have ideas.
Okay.
Well,
That's nonsense.
there's-
Wow.
I like
so
that. I like that.
there-
I
That's
like
a
that.
dumb point. Oh my god.
Okay, because
It's
of
not.
the nature.
It's great.
Can you explain why it's a dumb point?
I can do. I literally already done it, right? I literally already stated, shown you, right? Like talking about the difference.
What did you show me?
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. You see how like you asked me a question and I'm trying to answer that question, but then you keep interrupting, right? So that I can
Okay.
answer the question. So if you don't do that, then maybe you can actually hear my
My bad.
opinions.
Thank
and
you
I
for
can-
moderating that.
Emotional
Okay,
next?
great.
Are you gonna
So,
call her emotional
try it
next?
again. Sure, you can try that, Stardust, but it won't distract me. It will never distract me. But I talked about, again, how on social issues and foreign policy, right? There's a lot of debate on the right. I think on economic policies, again, that there's a lot of homogeneity, right? But when you're talking about especially social issues as to like who to hate, right? Foreign policies, should we actually be invading, right? Or is the conservative thing to be a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Where like you're more insular with your foreign policy, isolationism, right? Yeah. So there's like a big debate about that. Like like the money that's been wasted on these foreign wars, right? Is it actually a conservative? If conservatives are actually concerned about saving money, being fiscally responsible, then why are we spending so much money on these foreign wars? There's a big debate about this on the right. So that's really my only point. So ideas, you're saying like this is the only party that has ideas. The Democratic Party, no, the Republicans have ideas too, right? That you're allowed to have ideas. They have disagreements all the time.
I feel like
you're underestimating your enemy to your own detriment.
Are you done?
Yeah.
I think that maybe, I mean, obviously the right side has to have like times where they deliberate and like have their own opinions, have their own ideas. And I think that time is really fucking short and they get to the point where they fall in line really fucking fast. While the Democratic Party, for, I don't know, maybe the rest of our fucking lives, will be debating over the same stupid shit over and over and over again because everyone just wants their version of the Democratic Party to be the winner.
Okay, all right, whatever. Sonia,
Even
sorry,
if
you wanted
that
to say
means
something?
holding on to a cab for fucking ever.
Sure, okay. Zonia, you were going to say something.
I was going to say that there is a really, there is a pattern, right? And I think that Cherry kind of brought up an interesting point there. There's a much more diverse opinion space in the Democratic Party. And I mean, just the nature of progressivism alone is the nature of is willingness to change and to move forward and come up with new ideas and work with new ideas, or not necessarily work with, but to want to push for new ideas and new policies, and that in and of itself is going to create a lot of conflict and a lot of inability for others to want to just concede and allow something that is not as progressive or not changing things to become the standard, right? So there's going to be friction because of that. So I think there is quite obviously a lot more infighting and less desire to fall in line on the left overall, especially within the Democratic Party. I think in many ways the Democratic Party feels like a really ill fit for a lot of progressives, which is why there's been a lot of push for a third party. There's been a lot of push for creating a whole new party. And, sort of the middle ground to that was the Squad, right? They were sort of the middle ground of like, oh, we've got progressive people that we're going to elect, and get them into office. And then what happens when they get in? Sure enough, there's a whole bunch of pushback against them. They're having much more difficulty getting traction with their with what they are trying to push. They eventually settle down and stop getting as progressive within the Democratic Party, just so they can get more people on their side within the party, so that they can actually enact some policies and be a feasible representative.
That's a little unfair, right? Saying that they get less progressive because they, I don't know, have to work within their own party.
I don't think they get less progressive. I think that they realize that their progressive policies that they originally wanted are just not going to get the kind of traction that they want, and so they have to tone things down a bit in order for that to fit with the overall tone of the Democratic Party, and so that alone has caused a lot of backlash from their own voter base, which is why you've got a lot of infighting within the progressive space as well about whether or not they even want to continue supporting people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, right?
Yeah, but that's like ridiculous. I remember this happening when Jimmy Dore created a Medicare for All rally while AOC was in the process of helping to, what's it called? Not fundraise, but to get Nina Turner elected to Congress. And because she didn't show up to that Medicare for All rally, and they specifically said because she didn't like retweet or quote tweet them, that AOC was not a progressive candidate anymore, and that Medicare for All is not passing because AOC and Bernie Sanders aren't doing what they need to do.
It was ridiculous. And that's
a problem with the progressive side of like the aisle. And I think there are a lot of reasonable progressives that I stand the fuck out of AOC. But the people who say that she's not progressive enough, like, fuck you, you're like an op. I can't take you seriously.
But yeah, so there's going to be a lot more infighting in general with this more progressive space where a lot of ideas and the desire to move faster with changing things in the country is popular. So you're going to have a problem with people falling in line, and you're going to have a lot more infighting. So it's much more, it's a much more diverse opinion space, I would say, for ideas, especially change.
Okay, Alice, you answer it.
Yeah, I was just kind of going to back like what Zonia said there is like, I definitely, part of why I feel disenfranchised in a sense by the Democratic Party is that like, it's not like the Democratic Party is doing anything particularly for me and what my views are, because my views are much closer to even further left of Bernie Sanders, for instance. And the reality is that in the current political spectrum, candidates like Bernie Sanders are not going to get elected. They're not popular enough. So like there's I don't know. I don't feel good about where the Democratic Party is right now because there is just not enough unity between Democrats, whereas Republicans seem like they're quite strong in their own party, even if they're not strong in the sense of like, let's say crossing party lines, right? I think that Democrats to be able to be effective politically in America need to get better at crossing party lines. Republicans have to cater to like ultra conservatives essentially. If you look at like the demographics of the Republican Party, it's like 80% religious. It's like evangelicals are a huge part of the voting base. Conservatives are a huge part of the voting base for Republicans. So there's a lot of considerations that the Republican Party has to make that's going to totally disenfranchise a lot of Democratic voters. But the Democrats don't have that same problem in a sense. They could cross party lines a lot better. They could get moderates a lot easier than some Republicans can, but they don't. Like, Democrats are in this weird position where they're catering to a smaller portion of their voting base, and then also totally disenfranchising any chance of Republican voters coming over to them. So Democrats are in a weird spot, like, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't like Democrats because I don't think they're very effective for the policies that I'm interested in, but I also don't think they're very effective just general politically. They're not very effective either. For them to be effective politically, they have to go further from my views, but that's fine because my views are kind of minority, and I'd rather see Democrats be in power more than they are now. In a sense, like, I'd rather see conservatism, at least social conservatism, die because it's utter garbage. I'm fine with economic conservatism, but social conservatism is utter trash, and I'd really like to see it die out.
Victoria, please.
My thing with the whole Democrats thing is they have a great time of like cutting off their own nose to spite their face. It's like if it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if they can't agree all together, then they just all very much go against each other. And then it's once they do come into power, once they do have that like little bit of power, then because they can't agree on what to do with it, because they can't all come together like Republicans can and just be like, okay, well, we want these policies, even if we don't personally agree with them, we as a party can come together and do it. Dems are seemingly fucking incapable of doing shit like that because it's like, well, if it's not my policy, then no, I'm not gonna go for it. So it's like they get this power and then they're just like, I don't know what the fuck to do with it, so we're gonna do nothing. And then, Republicans end up going back into power and then doing all the shit that we tried to get done or reversing all the shit that we got done.
This idea that having 50 senators equals Democrats are in power is almost setting up Democrats for failure. It's almost setting up these progressive candidates for failure because there is a section of like progressive voters who want to see change right the fuck now. And when they don't see it because they're being impatient like children, they will literally go out and campaign against AOC and they'll campaign against fucking Bernie saying these people aren't doing enough ever, but they are your champions. And in order to get more progressives, you have to understand that this is a marathon, not a fucking sprint. I don't know how to reach people who are like unsettled like that.
You were talking about like literally the regular push and pull between those who are more on the activist side and more on the electoral side, right? Like who understand there are people who are outside who are constantly pushing the party to go further, right, in their direction. And then there are people who are who more electorally minded, who understand you have to work within the system. This is just kind of like the regular push and pull that's happened in any party, right? It happens in the Republicans too, right? Like that's the thing that happens there. When there are activists who want more, right, and are unsatisfied when people who they elect who inevitably have a level of moderation that happens. Because within a political system, that's what happens. To get anything done, there has to be a level of moderation, right? So when that happens, they are upset. But this is not unique to the left, right? It's not unique to progressives, right? And to say that they're arguing over dumb things. No, what? This is
who?
You, Cherry, you. You said that earlier, right? To say that the.
Oh no, I was just. Never mind.
Okay. To say that like the arguing. Between these parties over like the dumb things over and over again, right? Like these are literally the fundamental issues within our politics today. Like the things that they're arguing about, these things are actually quite important, right? Like the things that you're kind of just dismissing actually really do matter, right? Like that's the whole point of getting into politics, because like these specific topics are addressing things that matter to individuals. So to say that now, I think it's fair to say that some people are. Well, I'm more electorally minded, so like I get that we have to wait. Like nothing happens all at once. And in fact, I've yelled at many people about like as to why I think Bernie Sanders lost, and it's because of people thinking of moving too fast on these things and expecting too much of one person. But like the arguing and fighting, that's extremely important. That's extremely important. Okay then, great. So,
oh, sorry, I was talking to my chat.
So yeah, I think the fighting within parties is healthy, right? Like that's what a democracy is supposed to be.
It's absolutely healthy. I just think sometimes the criticism that gets levied on certain progressive candidates is not helping anyone.
Yeah,
a lot of spite as well. Like it just seems like there are things that are done out of spite, or things that are done. There's inaction out of spite from when you get to super. When you see activists who tend to be far more progressive than the general Democratic Party, there seems to be a decent amount of spite as far as that goes when they don't get what they want. So Not super healthy.
Yeah, so I think that when it, I look forward to the fights that are happening, because basically what I think was maybe Alice was getting to, Alice was getting to, is that the Overton window hasn't shifted, right? So Alice is saying that she's further left than Bernie, right? And I think I would be further left than Bernie, at least the policies that he advocates, right? But how we get there, how we get those policies, is by shifting the Overton window. And so we need those activists outside who are never actually satisfied. I think they're actually important. Now, how they engage with politics, like Jimmy Dore doesn't engage in politics in a healthy manner. Like, fuck that guy. But I like activists at the same time who are never satisfied, because they are the reason why we move as far as we do, right? They enter in these new ideas who, at the time, of course, are unpopular, but once you get them out there and you get a chance to explain them to the public, right, and rally support, well, then you shift it over to window. So I'm there for activists. I love them, who do that important work. But there's always going to be like that struggle, right, between the two.
I agree with you about like the concept of like, you know, some infighting in a sense, some different views in a party being good, right? That is good. I just think that the critique that a lot of people have, a lot of Republicans have this critique, it sounds like Stardust and Jerry probably have this critique, I have this critique, is that in the Democratic Party, in leftists and socially left people and progressives, it's toxic. It's not a matter of like positive, back and forth, essentially. It's not like we're bringing new ideas to the table and discussing them. It's people reeing on Twitter. It's people saying, you're not progressive enough. You're not, that's my problem, I think, is that the Overton window's not shifting because they're disenfranchising half the United States, more than half the United States population, instead of bringing new ideas to the table and listening to, multiple sides of a discussion. There's like this idea of only this view is right, nobody else is right at all. And like, everybody does this, right? This is not unique to just socially left people. This is not unique to Democrats. But it's something that is very visible right now, with Democrats, with progressives, with people who are socially left. It's really visible right now. It's a product of the times we're in. It's a product of Twitter being so visible. It's a product of, this is just kind of what's happening right now. I think that's probably part of what's being seen is the people that I know that are Republican have like fallen even further into their conservative views because of this effect. I guess that's kind of what my concern is that views right now are very polarizing. It's not a matter of everybody coming to the table and really discussing their ideas. It's polarization. And that's like a big problem in American politics right now, is polarization of views. But I think that's what my critique and complaint is.
But I disagree when people complain about like Twitter, like assholes, right? Like people on Twitter who are yelling about like whatever the fuck. Like I think Twitter isn't real life. I think Twitter has an outsized influence on the discourse, but Twitter isn't real life. Yes, people like freak out and say all kinds of crazy shit online, and I don't know how useful it is when like when we're talking about like actual activism. Like, well, that's why I talk about actual activists, right? A person who is just on Twitter, right? Like rejecting everything, calling everyone out and feeling self-important about it, right? Like that's not a person I would call activist. And I think you would agree with that.
I think a lot of our political representatives are on Twitter. Like, it's absolutely indicative of like the political climate in this country.
No, so hold on. Those two things, hold on. You tied two things together that aren't tied, right? So, right, I was talking
you
about.
You think aren't tied.
So I think people on Twitter simply yelling into the void, right, is not necessarily indicative of like the activist space. But
yes, but it's not actually a void. There's other users interacting with the information that's put on there.
But
like
then, great. So, but then you said, okay, well, we also have politicians there. Yes, politicians are actually in space, and I think they have. Twitter is good for getting their messages out, right, to the public, right? That's fine. But I'm saying that.
Did you think that Trump did harm when he spread misinformation on his Twitter?
Hold on. You're putting in new parts to this argument. So
I'm just challenging what your thought process is right now.
No,
by how relevant Twitter is or not.
You're gish galloping.
That is one fucking point.
Galloping.
That is the dumbest shit I ever heard. I asked you one goddamn question.
No, you asked multiple questions. You literally just asked multiple questions. You literally just asked.
I will look at the fucking definition of gish gallop for you. You need to.
Cherry,
I can woman-splain to you gish gallop. You let me know.
I'm too good at this for you to distract me. Like, you literally will not be able to distract me. You can try, but you won't be able to distract. I've done too much of this to distract me.
I'll
take
Prime?
it from the top. No, I'm ignoring you because I'm doing the first thing, and then I can tackle the second thing. So you have a question about Trump, I will answer that question after I get deal with the first topic. Okay, try it again, right? Individuals simply yelling on Twitter, right? That is not indicative of the activist space. Saying that we also have politicians on Twitter does not equal those people yelling, those assholes yelling on Twitter does not mean they are part of the activist space, right? So linking those two things doesn't mean anything. Now, if you want to ask me about Trump, I can answer that question too, right? But that's a separate thing. There's no point in trying to distract me with that. But I can answer it for you. Yes, Trump.
But you've misunderstood.
Go ahead, please.
But you've misunderstood. That's the problem. So you're talking about like activists, and you're saying like, well, activists are doing some work and such. But I'm not talking about activism. I'm talking about the general public. I'm talking about the people who go out and vote. And that's the problem is I'm not talking about activists. I'm talking about the people who go out and vote. And what the people who go out and vote see is they see the idiots on Twitter screaming into the void about how people aren't progressive enough and how that's what they see. The problem is that you're thinking about activism and I'm not, and it sounds like Sherry's not, and it sounds like Stardust is probably not either. What we're talking about is the general public. We're talking about my dad. We're talking about, the random guy who yelled the slurs at me out the window of his pickup truck. We're talking about the general voting public, and the general voting public doesn't give a shit about activism. What they give a shit about is what they see in the news and what they see, being regurgitated to them. And what they see being regurgitated to them is people who are showing leftists on Twitter as the people going, they're not progressive enough. They didn't put up the gay pride flag. And then they're thinking to themselves, well, I hate the gays. My Republican candidates hate the gays, so I'll vote Republican. And that's the end of their thinking process. Literally the end of the thinking process for a lot of people. And I'm oversimplifying, and I'm obviously strawmanning Republicans. I don't think Republicans are like that. Just a disclaimer. I'm memeing it up a little bit here. But the real answer is that the voting public in general does not care about activism. It does not care about what's going on behind the scenes. It does not care about lobbyists. It doesn't care about any of this shit. So there's a very big difference between the voting public and activists.
If you're talking, yes, well, I know that, but if that's what you want to talk about, sure. But then you've shifted the conversation because what was originally being said when I started this, right, talking about how activists shifting the Overton window, right, and then that was related to people on Twitter. Like the whole point is that that's not indicative of active space. Now, if you want to talk about the general public, okay, that's a separate conversation. We can do that.
What is the Overton window? It's defined by the general public. You can't shift the Overton window if you don't shift the general public.
Yeah, I know, but hold on. Again, we're mixing multiple things, and I don't think you and I are arguing, Alice. I don't think you and I are arguing. I just we're miscommunicating as to what we're trying to talk about. That's it. And we do that, which we do all the time. So I think you've correctly identified there's multiple conversations happening here. So I'm talking about the activist space, right, and the importance of the activist space and what they do, right.
So maybe you're having a conversation on your own.
Separately,
yeah,
Cherry.
I think
Cherry,
you are.
Cherry. You're
to
gonna
be
try.
fair, I
Cherry.
did bring up activists.
Yeah.
Okay, then you're talking to Stardust.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so try to distract me, Cherry. But no, it's fine. So there's two different conversations talking about the activist space and like what that does. And then my only point was that the people on Twitter yelling, right, are not necessarily activists. That's what I said previously, right? Those are two separate things. Now, if you want to say they have an effect on the general public, okay, sure, fair enough.
That's been what I said originally. That's what the discussion was.
And I said that wasn't just. No, it wasn't. It was more than that. All right, it's fine. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I think online spaces inevitably become incubators for new political ideas and social ideas. And over time, as they grow in popularity on the internet, they eventually make their way out of the internet and start affecting real world politics. QAnon would be a prime example of that. And or paleoconservatism is another prime example of that. That's been a growing thing in the Republican Party. So I think that it is. I think there's a very direct correlation between ideas, even extreme ideas, incubating in online spaces like Twitter and Reddit and 4chan, etc., and eventually breaking out into IRL politics and genuinely affecting our political atmosphere.
I think that's. I think that's fair. That if you're saying it's a testing ground for these things, like consider what they call it, like the there's a name for it. I don't remember the term, right? But basically, it's like the Breitbart pipeline or something, right? Like things would start like on the right. Things would start on Breitbart, and there what's that other, the Drudge Report, right? Like random shit. No, not even there, right? Things are starting now, like in 4chan, and like 8chan and all that stuff. Like they're starting in the people are bringing up these weird topics. And a lot of misinformation from these boards that gets picked up by like the Drudge Report and Breitbart, right? And they start talking about it a lot, and then Fox News brings it up, right? And then the mainstream media looks at that and is like, oh, well, there's a lot of discussion on this, so let's take it seriously. Let's bring that in and have a talk about that, right? Now, like this started on an internet board. And it's like complete misinformation. It's a nonsense point, but then the mainstream media elevates it and then gives it like a 50-50 talk, right? Like, oh, well, one person thinks like vaccines like turn you into fucking rabbits. I don't know, right? And then another person does it, right? So let's have a debate about this. But that's like one way these things kind of be testing grounds, and whatever like pops up, this works better on the right. But whatever pops up makes it into mainstream spaces. So, does that make sense?
I think that there's, I think your line of the way that it evolves is pretty accurate, but I mean, it still fits along with the point that these things, they develop online and become a culture and incubate over time, and so what happens there does matter and does eventually affect real world politics. So it can't really be dismissed. And even though I get the feeling of that, like, because I often see these things and I'm like, this is some terminally online shit these people are talking about. It's absolutely ridiculous. This isn't how things work in reality. At the same time, I also have to stop myself and think, but if they keep doing what they're doing and it becomes more and more popular, it will affect reality. And that was part of the reason why I pushed back on, our mutual friend last night, is because of that it will evolve over time and become a cultural thing, and eventually it will affect the real world policies and and the everyday reality that we live in.
But are all those spaces equal, right? Are the effects of all these equal, right? Like when people interacting with like AOC or like other people online, right? Directly interacting with your elected representative, for instance, that's a different sort of speech than one where people are just discussing things with each other, right? Or having infights, right? Like pointless infights, like with each other, that don't actually go anywhere, right? Like go anywhere. So like, I guess that would be my only pushback there, is that like all these things aren't equal, right? Just because it's happening online doesn't mean it will actually eventually affect, it'll come out into the mainstream, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're actually going to be killing people in Minecraft IRL.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Sorry, just messing with you. No, I think you're right. There are degrees, right? And there are some things that are like, well, it kind of depends. There are some things that you think are really like blatantly like, there's no way this is ever going to get traction. But we also saw with like QAnon, that was so crazy and far-fetched. None of us thought that was going to get traction, and then it did. So there are some areas where you're just kind of like, all right, maybe we do need to take some of these things seriously.
Can I just say, I think we have been underestimating the power of the wine moms. Okay, we have not been harvesting them like we need to. I've been saying this for a long time. And I'm tired of people making fun of the people who were like, I'm with her, Hillary Clinton voters, and we're all about that, because they are the most active, politically active, but also simultaneously have nothing to do. Like, we should be harvesting those people. Like, what are we doing? Why aren't we reaching out to them instead of making memes about, oh, wine moms, spreading, doing wine mom things and spreading their stupid ideologies, right? We should be harvesting the power of them. I really think so. I think we are underserving them.
Now, this is a very fair point. Have you guys looked at our wine mom lately? We don't want to overlook
They've got
this stuff.
nothing to do. They literally have nothing to do, and we always underestimate them. And then look what happened. Because we didn't take them, fucking QAnon went and got them.
True. And
Yeah.
Prime
based.
probably thinks I'm trolling, and I'm not
Yeah.
trolling.
No,
I'm
no, no.
being very
I'm
serious.
with you. I was going to agree with you.
kinda
Actually,
true, yeah.
Sawdust, the first thing you said that made sense today. But
This is a feminist movement now. We're taking back the wine moms.
But
Take
no,
back the wine moms.
but no, it actually matters what you're saying. I think it's actually quite important. And that the lack of engagement for that group. I think this is what, to Alice's point previously. Like, I think
Wait, is it a lack of engagement, or are they engaged and you just aren't like giving a fuck?
You're not
No,
reaching
no.
out to
If you're
them.
actually listening to me, that's not what my point was. I'm like, okay, my point
It's
was
a
is that-
question, Prime.
My
Holy
point-
shit, you hadn't
my
even finished the sentence. Obviously,
Yes, I hadn't finished
I'm
the
not
sentence.
listening.
Maybe if you had let me finish the sentence, you would have known. Right?
Maybe if you get it out
Listen-
faster.
Oh wow, amazing! Wow. Anyway, so like what Alice was saying, try it again, right? Alice, she brought up, I think, saying that Democrats are useless and an ineffective party. I think there's a lot of people, especially during this pandemic, was actually a really good time to do reach out when people are at home, right? And they're thinking politically, right? Like they realize that so much of like the pandemic itself was a political problem, right? If you have people thinking about this and unsatisfied with how things are, that's the perfect time to reach out to them and engage with them. But now there were a lot of people who were sitting at home, and those wine moms you're talking about, right? Like started looking on Facebook, right, for that engagement, and what they found there was like toxic, and then helped create the environment that we have now.
We left Pantsuit Nation behind, and that's our fault. We really did leave them behind. You guys can laugh all you want, but Pantsuit Nation, the secret Hillary Clinton fan group that we all joined, well, I joined at least, okay? That was a fucking phenomenon. And then we just let those people to their own devices after she lost. We just left them there. And guess what happened? QAnon got them, and now they're all anti-vaxxers or they're vaccine skeptics. We need to take them back. We need to take back what QAnon took from us, and that was the wine moms.
And turn them
anyone-
into Skirt Suit Nation.
Yes. Does anyone else have this brilliant experience, like every I don't know, every like 4 years, where like your Facebook memory timeline is just flooded with pictures of people who posted photos after Trump lost of themselves, Trump won, of themselves crying. And obviously,
I don't have
I'm
Facebook
anti-
anymore.
Yeah, I deactivated that shit.
Same here.
That's you know what
Deactivated it because of
that's
that shit.
great. I wish I had done that, but it is also
The state of Pantsuit
Kind of.
Nation really depressed me.
fair
So-
enough. It's kind of amusing. Like obviously, I also was not happy that Trump won, but the fact that people in New Zealand who couldn't even have voted, so it was always kind of out of our hands, were posting crying selfies. It just amuses me sometimes.
I think what we're talking about, Stardust was talking about, was
I want my
We-
mommies
we-
back.
no, okay, yeah. But I think the more sensitive thing that you're getting to is a lack of civic engagement. That here in the States, I'm curious if it's the same in other places. I'm not sure what it looks like in New Zealand, for instance, right? But we don't have unions right? Which is where people get lots of engagement, but they get a lot of information about what's going on and would form their opinions, right?
Worker unions.
Yeah, like worker unions. Yeah. Here in the States, we like our union membership has like fallen.
They're
like,
few and far between.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's problematic.
Yeah, it's a problem.
No shit.
Yeah, but like that's just an example, right? Of an example of avenue of civic engagement, right? Whereas maybe some people got it through church, but like church attendance is falling. There's all kinds of ways in which we're connected, and at this time of isolation, that's where we would have reached out. But since we don't have those connections anymore, right? Then like we'll reach out through Facebook, and then what we'll find there, or other online spaces, what we'll find there can be huge amounts of misinformation, and which helps allow something like QAnon to explode. That makes sense? Anyone?
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm sorry, I zoned out. I don't know what's going on anymore.
Oh,
I want my
no.
mommies back.
I mean,
want
there's
my mommies
always
back.
gonna be.
I want Pantsuit Nation to rise up again. You hear me,
Absolutely.
Pantsuit Nation?
You know
Are
what
you
I
wearing
think of
a pantsuit
pantsuits.
right
We've
now?
already been in a fight over this.
You
You
make
and
me
your
want to
pan-
go
you
buy a
can-
pantsuit right now.
You
What
can
is
take your
pants?
pantsuits elsewhere.
Pantsuits are empowerment to women.
Well,
Yeah.
all right. Well, then, thank you all. I really do appreciate you coming through and being a part of this.
Really? Do you want that to be the end? You
Would you
want
ra-
that to be the
Pantsuits are
moment that we
empowerment to
end
women
on?
Is the
I
I
end.
mean,
I can give an outro speech if you want.
yeah,
Trying to rally up the troops.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah,
How would
sure.
you say that we should recruit Pantsuit Nation?
Okay. I was just gonna give an inspiring speech.
Do it.
If that's what you guys wanted, but I don't know.